Welcome to Commander Central episode 122, and today we're going to be taking a look at listener Angelo's Ishai and Ludevic High in Just Guys deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
Max, welcome back to doing a Deck Tech show.
Yeah, just you and me once again.
Yeah, I think I'd even promised that Chris would be here because he was planning on being here for this one, because a lot of times he can't make Deck Techs. And of course he couldn't make one after I said he was going to be here.
Yep. See, you just need to stop dictating his schedule.
I do. Even though I swear he will be here for the next show. But
yes,
having now said that, something's going to come up and he'll have rented a bulldozer or something. So that's what will happen. I saw you went and saw Spider-Man Far From Home this weekend. How'd you like that?
I did. It was really good. We went to the 10 o'clock at night showing last night.
I got a message from you at like 12:30. It's like, it was good.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I'd see it again. It's enjoyable.
I've liked both the Spider-Man movies quite a bit. I was kind of ambivalent going into Homecoming, and it really surprised me.
Mm-hmm.
This one didn't have that aspect where like my expectations were low, but I liked it too. It was good. It was a nice kind of lighthearted palate cleanser after how brutal Endgame was.
Yes, exactly. You know, it still had all that classic comedy built in with that teenage romance stuff. Yeah,
it was genuinely very funny. It was sweet. There was a lot of good... Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. There was some kind of twisty stuff, a nice credits bit as well. So, yeah, I enjoyed it. My kid liked it a lot too. Anything else exciting going on in your life?
No.
Trying to stay cool because it's like 90 degrees and muggy?
Yes, that's disgusting, but oh well.
I mean, it's Wisconsin. We don't get that much weather like this, so we can brave it out.
Yeah. Plus, it's going to be twice as hot in Vegas next month. So
yes. Which is countdown to Vegas is we're like leaving in 30 some days. By the time this airs, it'll be under 30.
I can't wait.
We got some more official details about that too. I think we touched on it last show, but we can maybe go into a little more detail here briefly. They did announce at the Magic Fest they're doing a thing called Commander Celebration. I don't know if there's going to be extra stuff beyond what they've already announced, but we did find out for sure that's where that new promo Soul Ring is going to be available. The foil one is going to be available if you buy a Command Zone Pass, which is what gets you into like the Special Commander area, similar to what they did at
SCG Con.
SCG Con, yep. And then there's also going to be a Commander Party that the Command Zone is affiliated with, I think on Friday night. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that's where you get the non-foil Soul Ring promo as well.
And a random Commander 19 deck.
Oh, that's right, yeah. I mean, I feel like that Soul Ring and the deck almost pays for the cost of that Commander Party.
Oh, for sure.
So, and really that foil promo Soul Ring probably kind of pays for the Commander Pass between that and the just access to the area and the 4 on-demand events. I mean, I think those are both pretty good value things.
Yes, I totally agree, and I believe we are both doing them.
We're both doing both of them. The downside to the Command Zone Pass thing is, I mean, the upside is you get to play in an area where you don't have anyone like bumping you out of the table space because they're going to do some kind of an event, which is what happens. You can play in a place for 2 hours or so and then eventually get knocked out and have to move to another table somewhere else. So you can, we don't have to deal with that. But the problem is then if somebody didn't pay for the pass, they can't get in to play with you. Yeah. So I don't quite know how we'll deal with that yet. Usually in the mornings and later on at night towards the end of the evening, there's not enough on-demand events going on that it's much easier to sit and play games. So I would imagine, I'm just guessing, we'll probably be able to, go play with people who don't have passes in the morning and then later at night. And then during the day when things are going hot and heavy and you just can't find a table to stay at for very long, we'll probably have to retreat to the Command Zone play space just to avoid getting bumped out of tables.
Yeah.
But so I'm really curious how well that works. It looked like it was a pretty good deal at Star City Games at the SCG Con. So hopefully this will work the same way. And not having to constantly shift from place to place to place will be nice too.
Oh, yeah. That's really what I'm looking forward to, is not moving, on turn 5 of a game and not having to remember your board state. And
or having to tweet out where you're sitting. Hey, we're sitting at table, 2211. And then like 2 hours later, like, okay, and now we're over at table 412 and, do it again 2 hours later after that. So like people can find you consistently if you're able to play in one spot. So I think that'll be kind of nice this year. All right. If you, however, disagree with any of that and think it's not a great idea to have a pay-to-play or just want to share anything about any Magic Fest or GPs or thoughts you have about basically anything Commander-related, how would you find us online, Max?
You can find us on Twitter by searching @CMDR Central. We're on Facebook and YouTube by searching CMDR Central. And we are over on Patreon.com by searching CMDR Central, where if you are so inclined to support us financially, you could get one of these Decks You Play episodes just for yourself.
You can also find some pretty sweet t-shirts over on Teespring.
Yeah, head over to teespring.com and search CMDR Central, and you will see our Teespring store with our new designs that have been live all week.
I actually, you ordered some for us as well, so we'll have some shirts to wear for Vegas.
Yes.
I was actually just kind of like doing this tonight. I'm looking at my suitcase and I'm like trying to do some math in my head. Okay, we're there for this many days. Trying to decide if I want to try to just pack enough stuff or if I'm going to like resign myself to a Wednesday laundry day or something. So I'm trying to like do the hard math on that and make a determination. How many Commander Central shirts can I possibly have to bring? Or do I just bring 3 and do laundry?
Bring them all. That's what I'm going to do.
I guess we'll see. I'll figure that out. I've got 27 days or 28 days at this point by the time this airs. To do that math.
Maybe you need to put it on a spreadsheet.
There we go. That's a good plan. We have a couple contests going on right now. I was going to say, do we have any? But I know we do because we just talked about them.
We do. We have the Twitter drawing of the oversized 2-headed dragon going out. So retweet that tweet when you see it pop up to get entered to win. And then if you support us or become a Patreon supporter by the end of the month, you'll be entered in to win a Core 2020 bundle.
Yeah, and you know what? Core sets. I like one of the first things I ever bought in Magic after I came back to play was I picked up like one of the core set fat packs from like Core 2013, and man, was that a letdown. just in part because like it wasn't a particularly there was a window there between 13, 14, maybe even Core 12, where there just wasn't a lot of interesting cards. They were really keeping the core set power level dialed way down. That is not the case anymore.
No, not at all.
This is like a really interesting core set. So this will be a fun bundle to get. And there's a cool oversized die in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll be wrapping those up at the end of the month. But until then, you have your chance to enter and win for sure. So we have a deck to look at here tonight, Max.
I hope so, or else why am I still awake?
That is a good point. Luckily, you didn't have to put on pants tonight.
No, I did not.
That's always a good way to do a show.
And I'm sitting in Chris's chair, so don't tell him.
Oh, excellent. That never even occurred to me that you might be pantsless in one of our chairs. Good to know. I'll have to bring in some Febreze next time I come down there.
There you go.
So we got a few questions here that Angelo answered. The first is, what is your meta like? And he says his meta shifts a bit since there's a couple different play groups he floats in between, ranging from new to casual to tuned 75% decks. He prefers to have his deck be over-tuned than under-tuned since he can easily adjust his playstyle depending on the group. And then he doesn't have to worry about whether the deck is too strong. He can just change what he does. The deck then becomes only as powerful as the cards he plays that game. Due to not having one steady play group, he wants to be flexible in his spell slots or creature choices, using things like Stone Cloaker, which can be used to save things, or exile graveyards, or also to attack, and things like Response Resurgence, which can be used early to kill a key attacker or blocker, or late game to ensure a kill.
Yeah, so he said, we always ask what the goal of the deck is, and he said the goal of this deck is to be aggressive, win games through combat damage, and leverage card advantage. He hopes to do this by deploying counterspells and tempo cards to help snowball and win the game. We also asked what problems we should be focused on, or if there are any, and he said there aren't any glaring flaws to the deck right now, but it can always be tuned more and tweaked since the deck is purely flying creatures. Hey, I'm pretty good at those, of which there are only 1,641 currently that I can play. He's open to any flying creatures that fit into the theme of the deck. The biggest thing is that he needs help with weighing all the options available. A bit of history of the deck. It's gone through a few different iterations. First, he was playing a lot of angels and dragons, but that felt cramped and clunky. Instead, he took inspiration from Mantis Rider and Lightning Angel and was able to retune the deck to focus to be more aggressive creatures along the entire curve of the deck and emphasize various Binding of Thassa and Coastal Piracy effects to let him draw more cards as they deal damage. He also has tried the Blink Value Engine type of deck with Brago, Cloud Brazer, or Muldrifter, but it was not aggressive enough for the playstyle this deck needs to have.
The deck is a bit weak to swarm strategies, he says, as well as to hard combo. And otherwise, it can pivot to be a control deck if necessary, as long as he can keep up card advantage, which there's plenty of ways to do that in the deck. It can also fall behind or struggle against large green-based decks that can outpace his advantage and swing in with a couple big beaters, which is a problem a lot of decks would have. There's some options. Deafening Clarion or Jeskai Charm are ones he thought about to create a life cushion and have some removal, but he's not sure what he would cut. A lot of combat damage is chip damage, so he can find himself having trouble closing out the game since he stopped using a lot of large flyers. He's also having trouble finding a room for artifact and enchantment removal. He tries to be fast or underneath those things, but things like Propaganda can slow him down a lot. And it's not really an excuse. He has access to a lot of really good removal spells. He has a hard time finding something to cut for them. His mana base is near optimal, and it is a pretty tight mana base, so he has no problem casting things with like really deep pip requirements like True Conviction or Wind Reader Sphinx. He's got a pretty good ramp package too, so he can get them out a little bit ahead of the curve. He's also open and ready and willing to make changes to his commanders if necessary, with Kykar being one he's kind of eyeballing. And he doesn't necessarily have a budget limit because he's a Jeskai guy. He goes by literally Jeskai on Twitter. This is his pet deck, and he's just not worried about any particular cost here to make the deck succeed. So, this deck was tricky. What did you think, Max?
I thought this deck was tricky just because it is extremely tuned. It feels like I'm looking at almost one of my decks, trying to find that one cut I need to make for this new card or this card that I know just needs to be in the deck.
That's a really good point. I would say of all the decks we've looked at, this one feels the most like a deck we would see in our particular meta.
Yeah.
It's a 75% deck that's running with a system of rules in place. In this case, he's running all flyers, and it's tuned as tightly as he can tune it for the most part in that, within those constraints without moving to combo. There's only so hard you can turn the screws on a combat-based deck like this. But there's also not much fat left here. So I could absolutely see this being played at the shop where we play with the decks that we see and that we play, and it would fit right in. That, however, also doesn't leave a lot of room to make changes.
No, not at all.
But we still worked at it because that's what we do here in Commander Central. So the first thing here, let's take a look at the elephant in the room, which was the commanders. So he's running Ishai and Ludevic right now because, frankly, there's just not a ton of options for Jeskai.
Correct.
But we did just get Kykar. So what are your thoughts, Max, about swapping out those two for Kykar?
Let me pull up Kykar, because Kykar makes Kykar makes the spirit on non-creature spells, right?
Non-creature, yes, and it's not instant or sorcery. It's any non-creature spell. So he's running, 20-ish creatures in this deck with that and his 30-some lands. Half the spells half the cards in his deck make him a spirit, and those spirits also have flying.
True, and they can make mana.
Yeah, it also gives him a ramp option.
Ooh, I kind of like these two.
Interesting. Okay, I think Kykar is I was going to say I think Kykar is significantly better. Why do you like these two better?
I like these two better because Kykar is just better, I think.
Oh, sure.
So, and because Kykar's popular right now, so I think it's going to be another one of those Kykar decks.
Okay, that's fair.
Is it combo? Is it, you're going to get that, it's just flying tribal, and people aren't going to believe you.
I think actually we even commented during the show where we reviewed Kykar, you could do flying tribal with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think of that. I was thinking in terms of if you want to upgrade the deck, I think Kykar is better, but if you want to keep it with some identity and keep it as a deck that, no one is going to question what you're doing and it's going to be different than what they usually face, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
if I'm looking at it from a power level point of view, I just like Ishai, I think, is a solid commander, just in general. And Ludevic isn't bad or anything, but I also don't know if they're necessarily good. And there's definitely no synergy there. Ludevic doesn't have flying, so you don't get to take advantage of the enchantments. There's a couple of them in this deck that actually buff flyers. You also run the risk of giving people that key card they need at that point in the game when they're kind of stalled out.
Yeah.
And that's like all it does take sometimes. Like there's been a bunch of points in different games where someone else's like Howling Mine or whatever has turned things around for me. Getting that extra card can make a real difference when it opens up a piece that then, chains into something else. So that's I think the risk with Ludevic. I think Ishai is interesting. 4 mana is pretty aggressive for a flyer, but it's also a 1/1. And you need to rely on your opponents to do a thing to make it better. I don't think opponents are going to not cast spells because of Ishai. So I think it is going to, you cast it by the time it comes back around to your turn, it's probably going to be a 3/3, a 4/4, maybe even bigger than that. But I just don't know I think if Ishai was in Jeskai colors, it would be a perfectly valid commander on its own.
Okay.
And I think maybe Ludevic doesn't ever leave the zone very much, that's fine too. But I also think Kykar is just probably better overall.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. I just wanted to keep it these two to have fun.
Sure. Also, Kykar opens up a slot to add Cinder removal, which is one of the things he was having problems with. Because you lose one creature out of the zone and it opens up a slot in the deck. So I liked that aspect of it too, but so we're of different minds there, and that's okay. We will take another step and move on. So he mentioned his land base is pretty tuned. What do you think of the land base?
I never looked at the land base because he said it was pretty tuned.
It is, for the most part, it is. Like he's running the fetches. He's got the filter lands, the check lands, command tower, exotic orchard, all 3 original duels. So it's it's relatively solid there. Looks like there's 8, 12, 16 basic lands, which is a good safe amount too. Like you could maybe get away with less, but also you're going to survive a Blood Moon and you're going to survive a back to basics with 16 probably
especially
in
3 colors.
Especially in 3 colors, and he's got a good amount of mana rocks too, so he's probably safe there. That's a good safe amount. I wouldn't suggest altering that. The 3 cards I'm kind of in doubt about here are the 3 temples.
Yeah, I see them now that I'm looking at the land base. Most of these are enemy colors, so I guess you need them.
Sure. Yeah,
the new canopy lands might be better.
In the couple of battle
or the
bond,
1 canopy land and the 2 battle bond lands.
You also have a couple things in here. Like, I mean, there is not currently a City of Brass. There isn't currently a Mana Confluence. There isn't currently a Prismatic Vista. Depending on the meta, maybe the life loss from City of Brass or Mana Confluence is a problem, but I just generally feel like it isn't. There's just enough times when you don't spend all your mana anyway, and you just leave City of Brass to last. And it makes all 3 colors. I think like the advantage of being able to have it make all 3 colors versus just 2 on a temple and have it not come into play tapped. I don't think the scry offsets that.
Okay.
I don't think it's bad. I don't think the temples are bad, but I think 3 of them is 3 ETB tapped lands. That's 7% of your mana base coming in tapped by running all 3 of those. I just don't love it in a 3-color deck.
Especially if this deck wants to be aggro.
Exactly.
You won't want those tempo hits at all.
Especially in an aggro deck. So those are really the only 3 things that jump out at me. One thing though, I will note here that's kind of interesting. I don't think there are any colorless mana sources in this deck.
There's 1 pain land, I think.
Right, but I just mean like there's no like colorless utility lands that do nothing but
no Ghost Quarter, no Scavenger Grounds, nothing like that.
And that's maybe a medical. Maybe you don't ever see a Guy's Cradle. Like we always say, okay, so we say Scavenger Grounds. I run it in every single one of my decks because you need Graveyard Hate. But that's generic. Like generically, I say you need Graveyard Hate. Generically, I say you need Strip Mine and a Ghost Quarter or whatever to deal with a couple of problem lands. But maybe you don't. If he's playing in these two metas, and that's where 95% of his play takes place, and he doesn't see much graveyard stuff, and he doesn't see Cabal Coffers or Gaia's Cradle or even Nykthos, then maybe you don't need those things. So
I guess maybe you don't, and maybe that's just a meta call like you're saying, but I would rather be safe than sorry and pack one Ghost Quarter or a Tech Edge. Well, maybe not the graveyard hate stuff, but for sure at least
in part because
a land destruction land.
Right. Well, in part because of the way he described his deck, and because this is a relatively tuned 75% deck, I feel like then he's probably playing against similar decks, which means they are probably running a few of those lands. Maybe you're not seeing Gaia's Cradle, but like Nykthos in a monocolor deck or even a two-color deck sometimes has to get dealt with, or they're making 9 mana a turn. Cabal Coffers is a $30 card. It's not cheap, but like a lot of people have coffers out there. So, I will say that I understand that possibly if you don't ever see those things, you don't need to run them. But myself, I would really have a tough time not having at least 2 land removal lands and maybe Scavenger Grounds, just because there's no other graveyard hate in the deck really either other than Stonecloaker. Having like one more piece of graveyard hate to snap as an oh my god button, I mean, it probably isn't going to hurt you since there's so few colorless sources, and there's going to be times it saves you.
For sure. And I can agree with all that.
And he's also not doing a ton of graveyard interaction on his own either, so like there's definitely not much downside.
Right.
So a few little things there. Other than that, it's a really really good looking mana base. It definitely, I can totally see why he says he doesn't have problems with like the triple pip cards like True Conviction, because there's just so many colored sources there that completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's look at the instants here.
Okay.
Because there's not a ton of them, and I mean, I was going to say it's a pretty tight collection of cards, but this whole deck is kind of relatively tight, so that isn't unique here. There are 15 instants though.
Yeah.
I will start going over these here quick. There's Boros Charm, which is probably primarily used to save his stuff against board wipes.
Or Double Strike. Giving all these flyers Double Strike.
Absolutely, that can win games. Chaos Warp is just a great all-around removal spell. There's a couple of counter spells. There's Original Counter Spell. There's Dovin's Veto. And there's Negate. So he's got 3 different ways to like stop a combo, but that's only 3. I mean, if you are regularly seeing combo decks that are a problem, you maybe need 1 or 2 more, but it's one of those things at some point something has to be cut, and maybe you're happy with that amount because you're going to lose some games too. You can't have answers for everything.
Right.
So I think those are 3 solid counter spells, and I don't know really what I would change there. Cyclonic Rift, it's just always a monster, and you might as well run it until it gets banned.
Shh, shut your mouth. We've
got until probably Christmas.
That is the worst Christmas ever.
I know, I want to be a terrible. Unless you're sitting on a whole box full of evacuations. That's a terrible Christmas. You get Depose and Deploy. Enlightened Tutor, Magma Quake, which is a board wipe that doesn't hit his flyers. Path Exile and Swords to Plowshares, 2 of the best removal spells in the format. He mentioned Repose and Resurgence, which is a really solid card in this deck. Sphinx's Rev, obviously a monster, and Teferi's Protection, obviously a bigger monster. Anything here that jumps out at you, Max?
I don't like Dispose and Deploy.
I don't either. I think it does 2 things that are okay, and it doesn't do either of them well. Yeah.
I like what you said about needing maybe 1 more counter spell, and this is where I'd put Arcane Denial.
Well, or he also mentioned he needs to. Arcane Denial's a good call there. Yeah, that's what I would probably run.
Swan Song, something like that.
Swan Song, I would guess his argument would be that it makes them a flying blocker.
Yeah, same reason I don't run it in Brago.
Yeah, so Arcane Denial would make sense there. Even Delay maybe. But that's definitely, like, if you want to free up a slot, that's the card I would pull, whether it's to add 1 more counterspell to deal with the combo, or add like even Beast Within as a way to deal with artifacts and enchantments.
You mean Generous Gift?
I'm sorry, Generous Gift, not Beast Within. Elephant Within.
Yes.
Would be one I would look to slot in there in that slot maybe, because that's, I think, the weakest card of the bunch probably. Other than that, I don't know what I would pull. Enlightened Tutor, There's also an enchantment tutor over in Sorceries we'll get to. But he mentioned a big part of his engine here is getting those Bident of Thassa, Coastal Piracy kind of effects. And I mean, all 7 of the enchantments he's running are ones that are pretty impactful.
I disagree.
Okay, so do you think he doesn't need an enlightened tutor or doesn't need 2 tutors to get enchantments? Is that what you're thinking?
I think I would change the enchantments that we need to get.
Okay.
So I agree the 2 tutors are needed. The
okay.
enlightened and the idyllic.
Okay, so let's jump over to enchantments then.
Okay.
So what would you change here? What do you think is the thing that he would add or remove?
I don't like favorable winds.
I don't think it does enough in a deck that isn't making tokens regularly.
Right. If this was the Kykar deck, yes, I like this a lot.
Yeah.
If he wants to keep it Ludevic and Ishai, there are creatures that do this, so you get it on a body. So
that itself can also attack.
Right. So like Angel Jubilation, that's 1 in triple white, gives all your non-black creatures +1/+1, and also has the players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activate abilities clause on it, so it adds a little bit of a little protection package in there.
Yep. Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different uncommon creatures that are put in for draft purposes in Azorius that have like all flying creatures you control get +1/+1.
And there's one with flash.
Yeah. I think it's 4 mana, and there's a couple that are at least one that's 3 mana. So you're going to pay a tiny bit more, but the option to have it be an attacker, I think, is really, really useful.
Yes.
But even then, like, okay, it's maybe better to have it in a body that can also do something and, be an attacker or a blocker. But if you're running a deck that's only got, 20 some creatures, there's 22 in this deck, I guess 23 with the commander that care about flying, and there's not a lot of, I don't think there's any of these that currently make tokens. How many are you really going to have out simultaneously? Okay, so let's say you have 4 out, which I think seems generous. That's an extra 4 damage.
Yep.
It's maybe 8 damage extra if you have True Conviction in play for double strike. I just don't think it's good enough. I've debated not running it in my Talran deck, and I'm routinely hitting people with like 8 or 9 creatures in there because I'm making so many Drakes. So it's, there's been enough times when it's made a difference there, but like there's also been times when I've got 3 Drakes out and I draw that and I'm like, ugh, I don't want this right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this deck, I feel like it's just going to be really, really low impact a bunch of times.
Yeah.
At least Gravitational Shift has the advantage of also shutting down ground creatures. Like they can completely screw over like an Edric deck or a Goblin Krenko deck where they're hitting you with any ground-based deck really, any kind of swarm token deck it can really screw over if the tokens are not flying.
Yeah.
So whereas Favorable Winds, I just don't think it does enough. I kind of agree with you there. Well, and on top of that, I mean maybe he's running it for flavor reasons, but like there's also white buffs that like will buff all your creatures for 3 mana, I guess, but it'll also buff Ludevic. I don't know if that's probably something I would do either, but yeah, that's one I don't love. That's a good call there. Any other ones you might pull here, or what would you put in, or something you would add in that slot specifically?
Yeah. So I honestly, if you want to keep that as an enchantment, I'd put something like Always Watching in instead, because you're going to get the buff for non-token creatures, get the 1/1, but they also get Vigilance. So it's 1 more mana, but an extra keyword, and with your flying creatures, always being able to use them for blocking comes in handy.
Yeah, that would make sense. There's also, I wondered about haste here. He's trying to be an aggro deck, and a couple of the creatures have haste, but not that many. And, Fervor is 3 mana to give all your stuff haste, but Dragon Tempest, I think, might not be bad here. Whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste till end of turn. Like, you're not making a ton of tokens, you're not doing a lot of blinking stuff here, so basically you're going to cast a creature and it's going to give it haste. That's probably just as good as Fervor is going to be for 1 mana less. And it also, if you happen to play one of the couple dragons, it can deal damage to any target or X the number of dragons you control, so you're going to occasionally snipe off Birds of Paradise or something too. So I would, if I was doing a 1-for-1 swap with Favorable Winds, I'd be really tempted to put in Dragon Tempest instead.
Okay. What are your thoughts on military intelligence?
The maximum it can draw is 1 card. See, honestly, I think military intelligence might be better than the Bite into Thassa or Coastal Piracy. Just because, again, this deck is just not going to have multiple creatures out, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. But, looking at this is not dissimilar to your Dramoka deck. I think you're running, 20 creatures in that deck?
Yeah, 19 or 20, yeah.
I mean, how many times do you ever have 4 creatures out you're swinging with? I can't think of the last time I saw that.
If I'm not winning the game with it, it's because I probably will lose because I've overextended.
Yeah. So, I mean, occasionally you'll have 3 out or 4 out. I mean, it's not inconceivable, but I would wager, at least based on your kind of similar deck, Coastal Piracy and Bident draw you 1 card, maybe 2 cards on average at the most for that 4 mana, whereas Favorable Winds is going to draw you 1 for 2. Budget-wise, I would bet Favorable Winds Military Intelligence gets more bang for the buck than Coastal Piracy or Bident does.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Or
No, it makes sense. I get what you're saying. I also don't think it does enough. You always need 2 creatures. That's what I don't like about it. That's
true. Yeah.
You need to attack where the other 2, Coastal Piracy or Bident, you need to hit with at least 1.
Right.
Seeing that it's all flying, I feel like Coastal Piracy and Bident are going to be the better payoff in the long run. Just drawing 1 card off of 1 creature every turn.
That's a good point.
Is a really good over the long game advantage.
So let's say that Bident and Coastal Piracy and Military Intelligence were green pips instead of blue pips.
Okay.
Would you be running them in Dramoka?
I would be running the ones that make me hit a player and not just attack.
Okay. So you would not run Military Intelligence in Dramoka if those were green cards.
Right.
Okay. Well, that kind of then makes me feel like Military Intelligence maybe isn't as good then. And actually, when I was talking before, I had forgotten about the clause where you have to attack with 2 or more creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that changes it too. Yeah, I would probably pull that too. Nope. By both listening to you and reading the card all the way and the last line I missed, it's a good point. I think it's going to whiff too much. No, I'm with you there.
Woohoo! Point max.
You win. You're the best.
Cool.
See, if Chris was here, he could just tell us it's a trash card.
Yep. He would too.
No, that's a good call there. Anything else? The only thing in looking at these, I was then thinking about the land base. I'm like, man, I wonder if Hall of Heliod Generosity is worth a slot just because bringing back any of those draw spells or even Gravitational Shift or Smothering Tide or True Conviction is maybe worth having a slot for that just to do that.
Yeah, very true.
I'm actually thinking about putting it in my Sphinx deck just to bring back True Conviction once in a while when it gets milled or at the discarded or whatever. Or someone blows it up, I kill one person and then the second person's like, you're not going to kill me, and they blow it up. I think having that option might be useful, so I'm wondering if that might not be a thing here as well. But then we also get away from his thing where he says he can cast most of his creatures very easily. If you start running too many of those utility lands, and that becomes trickier, and things like True Conviction become difficult in a 3-color deck. So you don't want to mess. You don't want to mess with that alchemy too much either.
Right.
Sorceries. There's only 5 of them. This one should be fairly quick. There's Chart a Course and Winged Words, which are both 2 draw spells. Idyllic Tutor, which lets you get an enchantment, and 2 board wipes: Supreme Verdict and Time Wipe. What are your thoughts here?
I like them all. Time Wipe is a tad confusing to me, but I mean, if you're just going to bounce Ishai to your hand, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, Ishai, especially if you bounce to your hand, loses the counters and comes back as a 1/1, I think that's kind of uninspiring. I mean, I guess then they'll cast spells. It'll be a 5/5 next turn probably when it comes back around. Or you save, your Consecrated Sphinx or something. I still feel like... So you save the creature you want to save. Everyone else loses their creatures, and then you can recast it.
I feel like single combat's just better.
Well, maybe. Sure.
Because it's the same amount of mana. You're also hitting planeswalkers. So they can either pick and choose a creature or a planeswalker, and then they sacrifice the rest.
That's a good point.
This just destroys creatures.
Yeah.
And you have to have that weird, odd blue pip in there. That's
right.
what frustrates me. Supreme Verdict, I get it because it's 4, but Time Wipe at 5, it just seems odd in my opinion.
I also think, man, Blasphemous Act is pretty tempting too. 1 mana board wipe most of the time. Like I have a tough time. I honestly have a tough time not running Blasphemous Act in any deck that can run it.
Yeah, I think that's a great call, especially if this changes to Kykar. You have all those tokens that'll just knock off those generic mana symbols.
Right, or right, exactly. And then then you sacrifice them all, float the mana, cast, or with Blasphemous Act on the stack, then sacrifice them all, float the mana to have that much more mana in your pool to recast and get the thing going again. So you can kind of pull ahead of everybody then. Yeah, I think I like Time Wipe, and I actually was just ordering some cards today for decks, and I threw a Time Wipe in. I don't have a spot for them. I'm like, maybe I want it down the road. But it's one of those cards I just don't know where I would want it. I just have a tough time kind of picturing a slot for it. I think it's a good board wipe, but I don't know if it's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd be tempted to run something like Cleansing Nova. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of ways to deal with artifacts or enchantments as it is. That kind of gives him one more option. There's always Austere Command as well. That's the problem Time Wipe has, is competing with a bunch of other great board wipes, and I don't know if I would run it over most of them.
Yeah, I agree.
I liked Winged Words, although the problem here, again, with it to a degree, is there's only 22 creatures. 23, you count your commander that have flying, and you're going to have them out, I guess, pretty frequently, and it's going to be a 2-mana draw 2, which is great. But it's not that fun to cast for 3 mana if you don't have a flyer out. But I don't know what I would replace it with either, so I think it's probably fine.
It's on theme, I say it gets a slot.
Yeah, and I'm going to run it in Talran for sure, so I think I kind of have the same problem there. I don't have a lot of creatures in the deck other than Talran, so like I'm not going to cast it in that deck until turn 5 or 6 anyway, so this is the same exact situation, and I'm running it in that deck, so I'm doing the same exact thing. I shouldn't criticize. I like the card a lot, though. And I do respect doing things on theme. Chart of Course, I think, is a really cool card, too. I'm a fan of that. And we already mentioned Idyllic Tutor, kind of the same things that apply to Enlightened Tutor. There's some winning cards in his enchantment slot, so that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
How about Artifacts? This is pretty easy. You want to give us those, Max?
Yeah, so we have all 3 Signets, all 3 Talismans, a Soul Ring, and a Smuggler's Copter. And a Commander's Sphere. So
there's 8 pieces of ramp out of 9 cards.
Yes.
I'm guessing Ludevic is probably who's piloting Smuggler's Copter pretty often.
Oh, I would hope so. Or even like Hypnotic Siren or Storm.
Yeah, that's true.
Siren Storm Tamer, all those 1-drop.
I do think that I don't know about that. I think Smuggler's Copter is a perfectly fine card. I wonder if I was going to say, if you pull Ludevic out, it'll become less good, but then you're making those tokens, which can pilot it, which can crew it just as easily.
The only thing I don't like about it, I get it's a flyer. This is the only draw spell in the deck that discards a card.
Yes.
So he's not running Faithless Looting, Cathartic Reunion, any of those rummaging spells. So it just feels out of place.
And he has no graveyard recursion or anything either.
Right. I think there are better just creatures with flying than Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah, it was an absolute powerhouse in Standard.
Obviously, it got banned.
And I think in Boros, the filtering is a little bit more valuable. Yeah, I'm kind of not entirely sold on it here as well. You do have to crew it, which we mentioned there are a few creatures in here. But if Kykar isn't in the deck, there's not a ton of them. Like Spectral Sailor and Storm Tamer can crew it pretty easily. There's a few other ones that maybe you don't want to attack with, but I don't know. I don't know if losing a creature to make this deal 3 damage and draw a card and pitch a card, is it good enough?
No,
is the question.
No, it's not a good trade-off. You don't want to be trading Gisela the Broken Blade, a 4/4 to crew this instead.
Right. And if you don't make the trade, then it's sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the what ifs, like what if the meta is super targeted removal heavy, so someone goes to remove Gisela, you can tap it, crew the copter, hit with the copter instead. That's just too cute, I think.
So let's go with the best case scenario. He replaces his commanders with Kykar. So he regularly has spirit tokens that may not have haste to crew the smuggler's copter. Is it worth a slot then?
No.
I don't think it is either. I kind of agree. I think it's fine. It's a fine card, but I think you want to be hitting home runs and not singles.
Yeah. Kind of going back to that whole, it's the rummaging, the looting draw pattern. It's the only one in the deck. No recursion. It just seems like you're going to lose value over time.
Yeah, I think you want to make a decision with that card. You want it to either be an impactful creature or a mana rock. I think you don't want it to be a creature that's impactful sometimes.
Right.
Something like the Thieving Magpies is like, it's 4 mana, I guess, but it always attacks and always draws you a card.
Yep. No, there's tons of other creatures which I have when we get over there.
Okay. So that is one that we would both maybe cut. I think he did mention that green ramp decks can outrace you. That's just what green ramp decks do. I think if you're running this many mana rocks, I think that's as much as you can reasonably do. So I think this is a really good ramp package in this kind of deck. Could you put in a Mana Crypt?
Of course.
Yeah, and your deck would be better. It just would be. I would guarantee you this. If you pulled Smuggler's Copter out and put in Mana Crypt, this deck would probably be better.
Oh, for sure.
But, that's also a card that if you're looking to flex and sit down at some tables with weaker decks, you're either going to not want to cast it, which is no fun having a card in your hand you don't want to cast, or you're going to feel like a jerk when you do.
Or you just be prepared to play Archenemy.
Yeah, right. Maybe, yeah.
That's what I do when I cast it against more casual decks in Jamoka. Sure. I just know I'm now the enemy and I better figure out how to win in 5 turns.
Sure. Okay. We've done, I think, all the easier ones here. How about the creature list?
Do we want to do Planeswalkers quick?
Oh, sure. Let's do those quick, yeah, before we get to creatures.
So there are 3 of them. We have Dovin Grand Arbiter. He's the 3 mana one from Ravnica Allegiance. He comes in with 3 loyalty. His +1 is until end of turn, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a loyalty counter on Dovin Grand Arbiter. His -1 is create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying and gain a life. And his -7 says look at the top 10 cards of your library, put 3 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order. He's also running Jace Cunning Castaway, 3 mana. His +1 says make whenever 1 or more creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card and discard a card. So it's another rummaging effect like Smuggler's Copter.
Yep.
Or looting, I guess that is looting because you are drawing it first. His -2 is create a 2/2 blue illusion creature token with whenever this becomes the target of a spell or ability, or a spell, sacrifice it. And his -5 just makes a copy of himself that's not legendary. And then he's also running Sarah the Benevolent, 4 mana, 4 loyalty, +2 creatures you control flying get +1/+1 until end of turn. -3, create a Sarah Angel, and -6, you get an emblem, which is essentially worship.
So, let's start with Dovin here.
See ya, Dovin.
I have always kind of liked Dovin. I think he's an interesting planeswalker. That +1, you play him for 3 mana, he comes in with 3 loyalty. You +1 him, taking him to 4. You pop somebody with, say 3 creatures or something. He's up to 7. Then next turn, you can, take him down and draw 3 cards. That's pretty decent, like 3 of your 10 cards and put them in your hand. That's pretty good. That's like the dream scenario. That's the best case scenario for him that you're ever going to get is if you play him with a bunch of creatures out and he somehow is able to survive because you have enough blockers in addition to the creatures you swung with to put all the counters on him, you can draw 3 cards. I don't think that's good enough.
No, it's not.
And his -1 to make a colorless Thopter creature with flying, That's also fine, but I think there's better things that do that aren't on a Planeswalker body that's going to die after making 3 or get killed sooner than that because someone's like, I don't even want you to make flying thopters. He protects himself, I guess, but I don't think he does enough work.
I totally agree. And I wish his loyalty counters that he got went to something more than just look at the top 10 and keep 3.
Yeah, I agree. Whereas Sarah, I don't think Sarah is the best Planeswalker either, but I think a 4/4, I think it's making a Sarah Angel, like worst case scenario, that's something. That Thopter maybe doesn't change what people are doing. A 4/4 Angel with Vigilance, you can't just swing into that to kill, like in the Thopter, like, well, he made a Thopter, I'm going to swing the 2 creatures, I'll lose 1 and 1 kills Dovin. When Sarah makes an Angel, you're like, okay, if I swing it, I'm going to lose a creature and I'm going to kill Sarah, who's at -1 anyway, who's down to 1 loyalty anyway. That's not something you want to do, which means she probably survives, and that Angel's there next turn with Vigilance, plus she's buffing your other creatures. If you want to put it +2, I think she's consistently better than Dovin is, maybe often enough to be worth a slot.
Okay.
Yeah, I think she's fine. I would pull Dovin and put in, any of the other cards we've suggested that we thought would be good for the deck, whether it's an enchant or a haste enabler or a removal spell like Elfin Gift.
Yeah.
What do you think of Jace?
I think Jace is fine. It plays into that coastal piracy stuff.
Yeah.
Makes a flying blocker essentially. It's a good card. And it also his +1 triggers with his flying creatures. I'm not a big fan of the discarding, but you take what you can get, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think Jace is amazing necessarily either, but he's fine. I think he's probably consistently better than Dovin.
Yes. So. If I had to do a swap for Dovin for another Planeswalker, it would be Tezzeret Artifice Master.
Because he makes a flying blocker just like Dovin.
Yep. But his 0 is draw a card, and if you control 3 or more artifacts, draw 2 cards. Well, he has all those mana rocks. There's 9 right there.
Yep.
Him making a Thopter, plus maybe a couple mana rocks, there you are.
You make that Thopter to protect Tezzeret, and then you probably have 2 mana rocks out most of the time by the time you get to that point in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I like Tezzeret a lot. I don't know if I like him enough in this deck. I would probably pull myself. If you gave me this deck and told me to make some changes and play it next week, I would probably pull both Dovin and Jace, and replace them with a removal spell and a draw spell or something like that. Like a draw spell that is going to guarantee to draw me 2 or 3 cards, and a removal spell is going to guarantee to solve a problem.
Makes sense.
And I would keep Sarah because I think she's a little bit better than both of them, and I like Sarah for a flying theme deck on top of it. So,
gotcha.
But that's me. Last, but certainly not least, the cards that win the game here, the creatures.
The lands. Oh, we did that already.
We did the lands already. I guess I could have meant the enchantments too, because they can win games. But they need to have these creatures out to do so. So there's a pretty good mix here. They all do have flying. There's a couple of Angels, Angelic Skirmisher, both Aurelias, a Bloodwater Entity, which is a card actually I remembered it after I read it, but I was like, I didn't know what that was. And that's one of the ones I will touch back on here in a minute. Consecrated Sphinx obviously is disgusting. Regular Ojutai I've always really liked. I think it's kind of an underappreciated card. Emissary of Grudges. When it enters the battlefield, secretly choose an opponent. Reveal the player you choose and choose new targets for target spell or ability if it's controlled by the chosen player, and if it targets you or a permanent you control, do this once. It's also a 6/5 with haste.
We'll come back to that one.
We will also come back to that one. I agree. Some with a Broken Blade, flying first strike, lifelink, 4/3 for 4 mana. That's pretty great. Hypnotic Siren. It's a 1/1 for 1 with flying, but it has the Bestow ability that lets you steal a creature. That kind of scales nicely into late game. Kira, Great Glass Spinner, protects your stuff and has flying. Lightning Angel, a a golden oldie from way back in the day. Really, really aggro. 4 mana for a 3/4 with flying, and vigilance, and haste. Linvala, Keeper of Silence. Obviously a really strong card. Mantis Rider, which he mentioned in his notes, is one of his inspirations to be aggressive. It's a 3/3 for 3 with flying, vigilance, and haste. Remorseful Cleric is some graveyard hate. You can sacrifice it to exile all cards from a graveyard, and it has flying. Restoration Angel, flash and flying, and enters battlefield. You may exile target non-angel, and then return that card to the battlefield under your control. That's one I am also going to come back to. Okay. Siren Storm Tamer is another one of those efficient, under the curve 1-drops, flying, and you can sack it to counter a spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. That's a pretty useful ability on a 1-mana creature that kind of lets it scale. Spectral Sailor, also 1 mana for 1/1 with flying and flash. Flash is nice on there as well. And you can spend 4 mana to draw a card, and that is not a tap ability. So it's a nice mana sink later on. Spell Queller, 3 mana for a flash flyer, and you can exile a spell with converted mana cost 4 or less when it ETBs. And they can't recast it. So, when it leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner may cast it without paying its mana cost. Stonecloaker, which we mentioned before, lets you hit a card with a graveyard and bounce a thing. Thundermaw Hellkite is kind of an older card as well. 5 mana for 5/5 with flying and haste, and it comes into play. It deals 1 damage to each creature with flying your opponent's control, and you tap those creatures, which is really useful for getting an Alpha Strike in. Warkite Marauder, which is a 2/1 for 2 mana, flying, and when it attacks, target creature defending player controls loses all abilities and has base power and toughness of 0/1 until end of turn. And last but not least, Windreader Sphinx, 7 mana, but whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. And that's a creature, not just your creatures.
Yep.
So we have a couple here that we mentioned we've asterisked by. Max. Why don't we start with you?
I don't like Emissary of Grudges.
Nor do I.
It's a 6/5 for 6 with haste and flying. That's all fine and dandy. If you were to put in not anger, but fervor or Hammer of Perforos. There we go. I got there.
Yep.
That gives all your stuff haste, and it doesn't cost 6 mana. And his ability seems really meta dependent.
Yes.
Cool. It gets rid of a Beast Within or something, but that doesn't stop a board wipe. It doesn't stop a Cyclonic Rift, anything like that.
I've actually seen Emissary of Grudges cast 3, if not 4 times, I think, and never once did the ability go off. So at that point, you're paying 6 mana for a 6/5 with flying and haste. I don't think that's good enough to have an ability that might work once in a while. The other one I don't love is Bloodwater Entity, 3 mana for a 2/2 with flying and prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 to end of turn. And when it ETBs, you may put a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but I think this deck doesn't probably take advantage of the prowess very often. I'm sure once in a while it's a 4/4 with flying, and that's not terrible, I guess. And bringing back an instant or sorcery is almost always fairly useful, but it does go to the top of your library, so it does, cost you a card, quote unquote. I guess it doesn't cost you one, but it's not card advantage, it's card quality, I guess you would say, because you're picking an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. But that also means it's not probably accomplishing very much on turn 3, and it's maybe not accomplishing very much if someone has Rest in Peace out.
Right.
So I don't know if that one is quite good enough either. And the other one I had wanted to touch on here just a little bit.
Restoration Angel. I
wasn't entirely sure about Restoration Angel. It's not a bad card, flash and flying, and you can exile target non-angel creature you control and turn the battlefield under your control. So basically, you use Restoration Angel to save one of your creatures from a thing. But usually, you also run it in a deck where you have things with a bunch of ETB abilities. So it's doing double duty. It can either save your creature, and if you don't have anything to save, then you use it to proc some kind of an ETB. there's almost no ETBs on these creatures here.
You literally spoke to one of them with the Bloodwater entity.
Yeah, that's one of the few. Yeah. So then you're holding 4 mana up for an Angel on the off chance someone removes one of your things. And if they don't, I guess you flash it into turn. You don't have to not use it, but I just feel like there's absolutely decks where that's a super, super useful and strong card. I don't know if this is quite it.
Yeah, I don't think it is at all.
So are there any creatures you would like to see in this deck, Max?
There are quite a few. I was shocked to see something like either Archangel Ties or Windborn Muse not in the deck. They're both flying creatures with a Pillow Fort-esque effect. I think both those would be great against the Swarm type decks. Windborn Muse is essentially Ghostly Prison on a stick. And then Archangel Ties says as long as it is untapped, creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless they pay 1 for each of those creatures. And then when it's attacking, creatures can't block unless their controller plays 1 for each of those creatures.
What I like about both those two cards is one of the problems I've found over the years with propaganda type effects is particularly the enchantment ones. When you play that propaganda, you feel safe and secure, and you maybe do things that aren't that smart, considering the fact that people can cast any kind of removal spell and remove that protection, and then you're just boned. What I found is nice about the things like Windborn Muse and Archangel Ties is, for whatever reason, you treat it like just an accidental thing. You don't overextend because you don't feel safe. And because of that, you don't get blown out when somebody blows up the Archangel Tithe or the Windborn Muse.
Right.
It feels like it's an incidental effect that you aren't reliant on that just generates value versus propaganda, which can alter your play lines in a way that leaves you vulnerable if somebody is holding a disenchant. So no, I agree. Those are both solid cards, and they were actually both on my list as well.
Okay, I have a couple more.
Yeah.
I like Selfless Spirit in this deck. It's another utility creature like the Remorseful Cleric. This just gives your entire board indestructible.
It's just one more of those things you can do to turn a board wipe into someone else's board wipe into an advantage for you.
Yes. And it's also a kind of a rattlesnake card. It makes people debate do they have 2 removal spells?
Absolutely.
Do they have the Beast Within and Generous Gift? Do they have, 2 lightning bolts, whatever. I also think Loyal Drake would be fun in this deck. It has Lieutenant, and so if you control your commander at the beginning of combat on your turn, draw a card. And it's like a 2/3 flyer for 3.
Yeah, that's a good value creature as well.
My final one is Archangel Avacyn.
Yeah, I mean, he was going aggro here, but Emissary Grudges was 6 mana. Avacyn's only 2 more than that.
Yep. What I like about it is it gives that... What am I thinking of? Here we go. When something of non-human dies, right?
Yep.
All your stuff gets indestructible.
Oh, sorry, Archangel. I was thinking Angel of Hope. Yeah, Archangel's only 5 mana, so it's even cheaper. So if one of your things dies, it does the flip and hits the non-angel creatures, right?
Yeah, so when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. It's another... Wow, I can't think tonight. I apologize. Selfless Spirit, there we go. So when it enters, it's another Selfless Spirit. And then when a non-angel creature you control dies, you transform it. And when it flips, it deals 3 damage to each creature and an opponent. So, I mean, pseudo-wrath there if they have a bunch of little tokens.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the Restoration Angel, this is probably... Archangel Avacyn is probably better than Restoration Angel.
Yes.
It's going to do the same thing, but you don't feel nearly so bad flashing it in. You're not saving one creature, you're saving all your creatures, so it works to stop a board wipe as well. No, that's a good call, Archangel Avacyn there. Definitely. There's a couple other ones. I don't necessarily know if I want all of these or even any of them, but I think something like Aven Mind Sensor for the same mana cost as Bloodwater Entity is just much more impactful to the board.
That's opponents can't search more than their top 3.
Yep.
I used to run it in Dramoka. It was great when you could catch someone with their fetch. That's awesome. But I feel like it was dealt with quickly, or people just didn't care.
Sure. But if they deal with it, then you had to use a removal spell, which is not then hitting something else that's important.
Very true.
So, he mentioned this in his notes, God Eternal Kefnet. That's just a disgusting value card. Like if he's playing, it's an aggro creature in blue and in flying that has a ton of value on it. Again, I would run that over both of those, over Bloodwater Entity and Emissary of Grudges as well. Old school, and it's not anything that takes a lot of skill to use, but like Baneslayer Angel is a gross card.
Oh, yeah.
And I would definitely rather cast that than either of those two as well, I would say. He does have the Double Strike Enabler from True Conviction, but Metamai is a solid card too. Metamai the Ageless, the Sphinx for 6 mana that when it deals combat damage, you take an extra turn and Metamai can't attack. It's decent if you get that swing off. People then have to deal with it. If you happen to get the swing off and you have Double Strike and take the 2 extra turns, it's really, really good. I don't know if this is a deck for it necessarily, but it's one I would also consider over Emissary Grudges. And it's 7 mana, and he mentioned he took a few of his haymakers out. Drugskull Reaver is a really, really decent card that I almost never see in decks.
Because it's 7 mana.
It is 7 mana. But 3/5 a double strike, so that's only one more than what he's running right now with the Emissary Grudges. So it's one more mana than that, and it's going to do the same amount of damage. Emissary is a 6/5, but this is double strike, so it's going to deal 6 when it hits. And that's going to draw you 2 cards, because whenever you gain life, you draw a card. It has lifelink. So, I would definitely run that over Emissary Grudges. I think it's worth 1 more mana. I think the double draw off a hit is worth way more than Emissary Grudges' ability that doesn't really work. And it's a card that I think it's cool and almost nobody plays despite it being strong because it's 7 mana.
Yeah, so, very true.
I hate raising my curve up, but that's the kind of thing where if you pulled out, something else and lowered your curve elsewhere, you could very easily swap that in and, over Emissary and go up 1 in that creature and go down 1 somewhere else, and you're netting the same. And I think there's times it's going to be a really impactful creature to have out. And he's also doing that thing where he's also got the combat damage, draw you cards on multiple other things as well, and that double stacks here nicely. So that's one I would at least consider. I think it would be a fun one to run. And if people lose to Drugskull Reaver at 7 mana, they have nothing to complain about.
I guess not.
Any other things you wanted to mention here, Max?
No. I really liked looking at this deck. Like I said at the beginning of the show, it felt like I was trying to figure out that one new card for one of my decks, is how tight this deck is.
Sure.
So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, the one thing I was definitely, we disagreed on the commander thing. You liked keeping Ishai and Ludevic just to keep things different. It would genuinely bug me that Ludevic doesn't have flying. Like in a weird OCD way, that would bother me. So if for no other reason than that, I would swap in Kykar.
That's fair. I'll give you that much.
But, I hadn't really been thinking about the fact that people are going to assume it's, you run the risk of someone saying, oh, is this Kykar combo or something, and having to hopefully convince them it's not. I hadn't really thought about that. That's a really good point there. So that's totally fair. Other than that, yeah, we mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. This looks like a deck I would see in our meta.
Oh, for sure.
And I don't think Angelo's able to make it to Vegas, so I'm not going to get a chance to play against this deck in the near future, but down the road, hopefully we'll get a chance to.
Yeah.
If you yourself would like to get us to do a deck tech on a Thursday show for your deck, you can support us on patreon.com. Go up there and look under Commander Central. You can find out all the levels and how you would be able to do that on an upcoming show. We've got Thursday shows happening for the next 119 weeks, or I think that's what you had figured out, Max.
Yes, exactly how much mana Bad Tesa is.
Right, exactly. So we'll be back next week on Monday with a regular show and a deck tech again on Thursday. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin MacLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. The show is edited by Ken Peddle. You can find him on Twitter at LOAD3R. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDRCentral_Max. And you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Until next week, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.